Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cafe on Air podcast. As you know, I am Big Italy 42 here talking some NBA basketball for a nice 10-game slate on Saturday. I'm going to go ahead and kick things off, as always, talking some FanDuel and DraftKings. I'm going to bring you some Vegas odds with each game, break down each game, give you kind of the simplified version here for Saturday. First game on tap here, Philadelphia at Charlotte. Charlotte a 7-point favorite in this one. 189-point total. Al Jefferson looks like he will be out for this one. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist will be out. Cody Zeller will also be out. So definitely some concentrated value with Charlotte, if you'd like to call it that. They were nothing short of terrible last night. Some guys you could definitely target here. Bismack Biyombo, usually playing low 20s in minutes. Sometimes gets up near 30 when Jefferson sits out. 24 fantasy points on FanDuel last night. 26 the game before. He's at just $4,000 on FanDuel. I don't mind him at all. On DraftKings, he's got a nice price as well at $3,400, so I think that he is a fine target. You could look at Kemba Walker, who was terrible last night. 1 for 9 in 28 minutes, 4 turnovers, 3 fouls. He makes for a tournament option only tonight. Of course, a great matchup against Philly. He's $7,700 on DraftKings, and on FanDuel, he's $84, which definitely a little bit pricey for me there. On the Philly side of the ball, obviously, you're looking at guys like Ish Smith, who's at $6,400 on FanDuel, and on DraftKings at $61. He's got a fine matchup, as we know. Kemba Walker, Mo Williams, neither one a very good defender. And then, of course, Nerlens Noel, who's at $84 on FanDuel, and a little bit cheaper on DraftKings there at $7,900. So he makes for a fine play as well. And elsewhere, you're going to be looking at a guy like Marvin Williams, who at $4,800 on FanDuel, still going to be locked into big minutes. Still played just 29 last night, but a blowout. I mean, Charlotte had less than 60 points going to the fourth quarter. Just a terrible game for them all around. But he was solid. 31 fantasy points last night. Listed at $4,800, like I said, on FanDuel. And he's got a nice price tag on DraftKings as well, sitting at $5,100. So I think he makes for a nice value play. Kind of creeping up there, but going to be locked into some minutes, and obviously not a tough matchup against Philly at all. Little bit of concern, I guess, against Nerlens Noel, but I'm not too worried about it. All right, moving on to our next game here. We have Miami at Detroit. Miami a 1-point favorite here, 192.5-point favorites. Looks like Greg Monroe unlikely to play. Dwayne Wade questionable to doubtful, depending on where you're looking. So this one's going to be pretty ugly, to be honest with you. Not a whole lot I'm going to want from this game with the low total on a 10-game slate. But you can still look at guys like Andre Drummond, especially for tournaments. He's sitting at $8,600 on DraftKings. On FanDuel is at $92. And went really low owned last night. Had a huge game. 14 and 22 with 6 blocks against the Bulls. Going up against Hassan Whiteside tonight, who, came back from the injury. He's doing fine, but really not worth his elevated price tag from his performances earlier in the season. So that's a pass for me. If Dwayne Wade sits this one out, yes, there should be some values opening up, but nobody that I have great confidence in. You've got your Henry Walkers and your Tyler Ennis's, and James Ennis, and just really nobody I'm going to be looking at on the Miami side of this ball. You can look at Goran Dragic, makes for a fine play, sitting at $6,700 on DraftKings, and on FanDuel at $63. Like him a little bit more there. But outside of that, like I said, low total. Just not a game I'm going to be investing in heavily tonight. Next up, Boston at Toronto. Toronto a 3-point favorite here, 208-point total. So this is the kind of game we're looking for here. A lot more exciting, a lot more fantasy goodness here. And as you're looking, you've got Kyle Lowry, who is officially questionable. However, you know as well as I do, there's very, very little chance that he's going to be playing tonight. Doesn't even have an actual timetable for his return. So that tells you once again, like I've said over and over, and you're only going to have to hear it a few more times with the season coming to a close. DeMar DeRozan, you play him when Kyle Lowry is out. And if you did that last night, you probably did pretty well. 27, 8, and 8 for him last night. Huge performance. He's sitting at $8,000 on DraftKings. His FanDuel price is at $78. So against Boston, he should see some Avery Bradley, who's a solid defender, but DeMar DeRozan still got some size and strength on him. Not too concerned there. He makes for the top option. You've obviously got Lou Williams, who had himself a nice game last night as well. He's sitting at $5,000 on FanDuel. And on DraftKings, he's got himself a nice price as well, 54. A little bit more pricey, but should be locked into high 20s, if not low 30s in minutes. Makes for a fine play there. Grievous Vasquez in play again, but once again, sitting at $5,000 on DraftKings, a little bit pricey. Just 41 on FanDuel, so a little easier to play him, but you saw his floor last night. 16 fantasy points, 3 of his last 4 under 20, so if you need a filler for your cash game, he's not terrible, but really not much upside with him right now, so not a guy that I'm going to be targeting really at all tonight unless he just kind of fits into a lineup. Brooklyn at Atlanta. Atlanta a 9-point favorite here, 203.5 point total. So this one should be a good game. I think Brooklyn can keep it close. They're playing great basketball right now, and Brook Lopez is the first guy we need to talk about in this one. Brook Lopez obviously playing tremendous ball right now. He's sitting at $8,200 on DraftKings. FanDuel price at $84. Seems a little bit pricey, but if you look what he's been doing recently, it's just tremendous. 30-17, 18-7, 24-11, 30-11. The list goes on. The guy is one of the hottest players in the league right now. And Atlanta, with the size differential, one of the worst offensive and defensive rebounding teams in the league. So definitely a matchup to exploit there. Good defenders, not great rebounders. So I still like Brook Lopez quite a bit here. Darren Williams, keep coming back to him. Talked about him yesterday. Talked about him 2 days before that. The day before that. He's on fire right now. Brooklyn's making their push here in the playoffs, trying to move up the ladder in the Eastern Conference, and he's just playing tremendous ball. 45 fantasy points his last 2 games. Still just $6,600 on FanDuel, so he makes for a great play there. 63 on DraftKings. Rose a couple $100. Still not enough for me to get away from him, even in a tough matchup against Jeff Teague. I'm going to be riding the Darren Williams train until the wheels fall off. So if you want to ride it along with me there, still one of the better value plays on the night for me. So elsewhere in this one, you could look at a guy like Joe Johnson. He's playing well. He's got a cheap price tag at $5,900 on FanDuel. His DraftKings price, not bad either. He's sitting there at 61. So obviously you prefer him a little bit more on FanDuel, but makes for a fine play there anyway. Here's another ugly one with a low total. Washington at Memphis, 188-point total. Minus 7.5 for Memphis. And this is the lowest total on the night. There's a couple really low ones, as we've already seen. There's more to come where that's at. So this is a game that I'm not going to be avoiding it, but I'm not going to be forcing guys into my lineup from this game because of the low total, because of a fairly high price tag. You've got Tony Allen, who missed out on yesterday's game. He's listed officially as questionable for this one. Doesn't change a whole lot for me either way. Both teams, some of the better defenders in the league as far as team defense goes. So no great individual matchups here. You can take advantage of some pricing discounts here. You've got Mike Conley sitting at $6,100 on DraftKings. His FanDuel price is only $59, so I think he's in play. John Wall, $9,000 DraftKings, $97 FanDuel. Just doesn't have much upside tonight in this slow-paced game at that price, so really not a guy I'm looking at. You can put him in some tournaments if you want, but I don't really see the need to force it in on a 10-game slate. Jeff Green played tremendous last night. Put up 32 fantasy points in 37 minutes. He's got a nice price at $5,200 on FanDuel. His DraftKings price at $56. So don't mind him at small forward. There's not a ton of options there. Outside of that, no guys I'm really investing much in. Zach Randolph has a really cheap price tag on DraftKings still. I think he's a fine cash play at $6,900, but you don't expect big upside, like I said, in this small total tonight. So looks like Nene sat out last night, of course, as you know, for some rest. Maybe he plays tonight, no indication. I'm not touching that front court for Washington in this at all. I mean, you could look at Marcin Gortat in some tournaments if you'd like, but as we've seen, I mean, he's pretty much capped at 30 minutes unless he has to play huge. And I just really don't see the need to force him in there against Marc Gasol tonight. So for me, mostly just an avoid here tonight. Next up, Orlando at Milwaukee. Milwaukee, an 8-point favorite here, 194-point total. So on the lower side, once again, and there are a couple options that are here, and an interesting one from last night. If you played last night, you probably didn't play this guy because he came out of nowhere, but OJ Mayo had a monster game last night. 24 points, 6 dimes, 5 rebounds, 2 steals, and a block, 46 fantasy points. Well, he also shot 69% from the field. You're not going to see that again, but maybe he's going to see some increased minutes down the stretch. So at $3,200 at shooting guard on DraftKings and on FanDuel with another cheap price tag as well at $41, I don't think he's a terrible play. Obviously much better on DraftKings. Kind of if you make your lineup, You need a shooting guard. You don't like anyone else. He could fit. He's been playing decent minutes over the last two. Missed some time with injuries this year, but he's a guy with low floor, or a high risk, medium risk, I guess. Medium risk, high reward type of guy. So certainly don't expect anything like last night, but he could get you 15 to 20 fantasy points and pay off that tag nicely too. So as we know, Orlando, a pretty bad defensive team. So don't mind targeting them. Victor Oladipo was a complete bust last night, shooting 4 for 19. Not really paying his price tag tonight. I will be paying price tag of Nikola Vucevic. Last night, in a great matchup, had an enormous game. 37 points, 17 rebounds. I mean, he looked like DeMarcus Cousins, if only DeMarcus Cousins hadn't still shown him up with a monster triple-double last night. But if you had that duo anywhere, you were way ahead of the pack. And Vucevic with one of his cheaper price tags of the entire season still. Sitting at $7,600 on DraftKings, $82 on FanDuel. Don't mind him at all. You've got Zaza Pachulia. He's at $6,300 on FanDuel. I don't think he's a terrible play if you want to be different in a tournament, but I don't expect a huge upside. $59 on DraftKings. I don't think he's a terrible play there either, but not a guy that I'm actively targeting. You got Ersan Ilyasova. Terrible first half last night. Turned it around the second. Ended up with 26 fantasy points against Boston. A fine matchup for him. I'm not paying his DraftKings price at $5,600. You could look at him on FanDuel where he's at $58. I don't think he's a terrible play there. But outside of that, I'm really not going to be forcing many of these guys into my lineup either. Just not a very exciting game. I mean, you've got Tobias Harris played really well last night. Spencer Limbach called that one. He was a big fan. Put up 25 and 12. So give him a look as well. And Elfrid Payton in tournaments only because of his high price tag. He's a guy that can fill up stat sheet quickly. $7,900 on FanDuel. His DraftKings price is sitting at $75. So definitely not bad there either. I think you can give him a look in some tournaments. Not a ton of point guard options that I'm in love with here. So next up, Golden State at Dallas. We've got Dallas a 5.5-point dog, as expected, despite being at home, to Golden State. 212 point total. So this is what we're talking about here. A nice close game and big total. There should be plenty of fantasy goodness in this one. And a guy I'm looking at, first and foremost, Steph Curry. $9,800 on FanDuel. His DraftKings price tag, yet another discount from DraftKings, so thank you for that. He's sitting at $9,300. And going up against Rajon Rondo and company, he should have himself a field day against a terrible trio of defenders up top. So I like Steph Curry a lot tonight if this game stays close. Really not much to play for, but as we've seen, he's still playing in the mid-30s in minutes. So doesn't seem like he's going to be resting unless we hear he's not going to play. I have no problem playing him tonight in this great matchup and at a discounted price tag. So I'm a fan there, definitely. And elsewhere, you've got Klay Thompson and Monte Ellis at shooting guard position. Not a ton of shooting guard options as usual. Ellis, the more volatile of the two. Klay Thompson sitting a little bit pricier. I don't mind either guy tonight, whichever one you can kind of fit into your lineup. I want to get myself a lot of exposure to this game and one other one that we're going to be talking about in a few minutes here. And on the Golden State side of the ball, outside of those two, really no one I'm looking at. You've got Draymond Green's been getting to himself some rest. On back to the Dallas side, Chandler Parsons is doubtful for this game. You assume he's not going to play, which means Richard Jefferson will probably get the start, but Al-Farouq Aminu is the guy you're going to be looking at $4,400 on FanDuel. His DraftKings price is nice as well at $39. If you wanted to go the Richard Jefferson route, I guess I don't blame you. He's $3,200 on DraftKings, minimum salary on FanDuel, but I mean, he really just doesn't have much upside at all unless he's just knocking down every shot. Even when he starts, he doesn't take many, so don't let that fool you. If Jefferson starts, doesn't matter. Aminu's the guy you're going to want here, assuming that Parsons sits. He's got big upside at a cheap tag, so I'm a big fan of his tonight. You could look at a guy like Dirk Nowitzki. Obviously, Dallas still fighting for playoff positioning. He's played well, 19 or more real points each of his last 3 games. Peripherals, not so great across the board at his old age, but $6,000 on FanDuel is not a bad price at all. $59 on DraftKings. Makes for a great filler in your cash games right there. You kind of know he's going to get you 25 to 30 fantasy points. If he gets you more, it's a bonus, but cheap tag and a high total. Don't mind him at all tonight. Next up on the docket, the Clippers at Denver. Clippers a 9.5-point favorite here, 216-point total, the biggest on the night. And you got your obvious guys are in play here. And as I'm saying that, you're looking at the price tags. The first thing I looked at this morning was, is Blake Griffin still cheap? And FanDuel said, no, he's not, $9,500. I move over to DraftKings and they say, yes, Blake Griffin at $8,600 against Denver. And I say, sign me up. I'm going to get myself some Blake Griffin, quite a bit of Blake Griffin. And he's been playing very well recently. Coming off a 24-7-8 game before that against Golden State, 40-12-5. So $8,600 on DraftKings. That is your special of the day from their end. They're hooking you up with the Saturday special for Blake Griffin. Make sure you take advantage in this great matchup. I'm not too concerned about the 9.5-point spread there. I'm going to be getting myself plenty of shares of Blake Griffin. He's going to eat down low against this terrible front court, and I'm a big fan. You can look at Chris Paul. He's at $9,700 on DraftKings. His FanDuel price is much, much higher, $11,000. Too much for me. And again, they should win handily. But, I mean, coming off one of the better performances of his career at 41-17-5 with just one turnover against Damian Lillard in Portland. Ty Lawson, a much better defender than Damian Lillard, but at the same time, it is still Chris Paul. So if this game stays close, Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, both could have huge games. But if I'm taking one of the two, not only for the discount, but also for the upside, I'm going with Blake Griffin. Ideal matchup. Absolutely love Blake Griffin there tonight. On the Denver side of the ball, I'm really not a huge fan of anyone here. I mean, you've got guys that you can look at really at every position who are in play. Danilo Gallinari, a little bit pricey for me. Wilson Chandler is a guy who has had a terrible floor his last two games. 6 and 14 fantasy points, so no thanks for me there. If you've been an NBA DFS player for a few years here, Kenneth Faried and Blake Griffin have had themselves some battles. And that was a nice little stack last year, and I believe even the year before. Those two guys going at it, you just go ahead and slot them both in. Neither one a great defender. Blake becoming a better one at his in his prime now, but Kenneth Faried a very risky option. But it's definitely a fun battle whenever these two go head-to-head. So I don't mind him in a tournament either. And another guy you can look at now is DeAndre Jordan. He's very, very cheap now compared to what he was after that huge run. But $8,100 on DraftKings, I really don't mind him tonight if you're going to pay up. At $9,000 on FanDuel, no thanks for me. But like I said, Denver's front court's terrible. And I don't know that I would roll both DeAndre and Blake in the same lineup. But I think getting some exposure to both is not a bad idea, especially on DraftKings where they're both cheap tonight. And I don't love a ton of center options. So don't think that's a bad way to go at all. Next up, we have Utah at Phoenix, 189-point total, 1.5-point favorite for Phoenix. Brandon Knight doubtful, but I am still just not a big fan of this one. Low total, yes, it's going to be close. You got Alex Len that's out, so you're obviously not playing Alex Len, but who you are playing is Brandon Wright. $4,900 on FanDuel at center, and his price tag on DraftKings at power forward, keep in mind, is $5,000. And obviously a tough matchup against Rudy Gobert, but he's going to have to play minutes. I don't mind him at all if you're going cheap, despite the tough matchup, because it should be a close game. But I'm not going overboard. Definitely not a must-play by any means. In a better matchup, he'd be close to that for me. But I would probably prefer him to Gobert, only because Gobert's almost twice as much, and obviously a much higher ceiling, but not much higher of a floor. So I'm going to avoid that. But I do like some Derek Favors, assuming that he plays big minutes. If he's still at around 25 to 30, it's definitely risky. So tournament-only option due to those factors. Obviously still looking at a guy like Marcus Morris. He's had 2 down games the last 2 games. Hopefully his minutes get bumped back up. He makes for more of a tournament play as well, in case you're noticing a theme here in this one. And as he always is, the most contrarian small forward tournament play, Gordon Hayward, $8,100 on FanDuel. His DraftKings tag at 78. Not a guy that you should be playing in all your lineups, but he always flies under the radar. He's got that 50-point upside, so I think he makes for a fine GPP play. And then you've got guys like Eric Bledsoe, who I'm not playing in this matchup because it is the best team defense in the entire league, not particularly close. But, you know, you could look his way, I guess. I'm not going that route, though. So that's on you if you want to go there. Trey Burke has been playing well off the bench. If you want a flyer in a tournament, he's sitting at $5,700 on FanDuel, $56 on DraftKings. Single bullet only, though, for me in that one. Last game on the slate, New Orleans at Portland, 197-point total. Portland favored by 5.5 on this one. And we saw last night, not Anthony Davis, but Tyreek Evans stealing the show. And coming off 19, 12, and 9, and a great matchup last night, if a matchup could get any better, this is the way it gets better. Now he gets Damian Lillard, who has been an absolute sieve on defense, been getting dominated by anyone and everyone who's going up against him right now. So I actually really, really like Tyreek Evans tonight at $7,800 on FanDuel. His tag on DraftKings is very nice as well. He's sitting there at $7,600. Back to shooting guard now for Tyreek Evans. Not sure why, but looks like Tyreek Evans back to shooting guard. I mean, obviously playing some time at the 1, at the 2. Doesn't matter. Be happy you can get Tyreek Evans at shooting guard on DraftKings tonight. I'll be locking him in quite a bit. I do love the matchup there. Anthony Davis versus LaMarcus Aldridge should be a battle. Not sure I'm willing to pay up for either one of these guys outside of a tournament due to the fact that they are facing each other head-to-head. It will be a tough matchup. And elsewhere in this one, like I said, another game I'm not going overboard on, but you could look at a guy like Nicholas Batum. New Orleans has struggled with small forwards all season long. And Batum, been kind of boom or bust recently, but he's usually got a floor right around 20 to 25 fantasy points, and he can kind of fill it up if Lillard's locked up in a tough matchup and Aldridge in a tough matchup. Lillard, I think, would be the one I would play if I need one of Aldridge or Lillard. And at $8,400 on FanDuel, I'm not in love with the play at all. But if you look at his price on DraftKings at $78, I do like him quite a bit. So that's going to wrap things up for me here today. I will be back on Monday with the first MLB Cafe on Air podcast. I cannot wait. Excited for the new season. We've got a ton of great content on dailyfantasycafe.com. Check me out at BigItaly42 on Twitter. Find us at DF Cafe. I'm checking out. I will see you guys on Monday.